mentor, my colleague, my friend, in many ways my inspiration. And since I didn't give a talk at the conference this year, this is it. Valerie fills many lenses in both perception and substance. Most of her know her as a veteran phenomenologist and lifelong academic. She was first formally trained as a sociologist, but born to the scholarship of feminism. She was soon called to phenomenology and discovered her passion for Alfred Schutz, Martin Heidegger, and George Herbert Mead. Literally, she would later write a historical novel, Flesh and Mind, where she fictionalized herself romantically involved with each of them. Valerie is a notable scholar, having authored 7 books, including the historic novel and over 40 journal articles. Her ovarian text, Becoming Mature, in 1989, presented her integrated theory of development as influenced by women's childhood experiences, and the follow-up research has continued as one of her life's work. Her highly influential text, Mindful Inquiry in Social Research, which she published with Jeremy Shapiro in 1998, provided a diverse and accessible framework for understanding cultures of inquiry and epistemological orientations in human science research, and it continues to be widely used today in academia and practice. I use it with my students. Transformative Phenomenology, co-authored with David Rehorek in 2008, has become a brand and foundation for applied phenomenologists. Also, Valerie's influence on somatic phenomenology has been pivotal to current movements in embodied research. This thread is apparent in one of her recent books, Contemplative Social Research, in which I was honored to contribute a little chapter. A recipient of multiple awards and research grants, Valerie has created and delivered over 80 papers, presentations, and keynote addresses worldwide. She served as editor of the SPH Book Review Journal Clinical Sociological Review and the Sociological Quarterly from 1994 to 1997. She has been instrumental in fostering development here at SPHS, where many colleagues and students have benefited from her brilliance and passion. Valerie is a longtime faculty. Just feels like a lifetime. At Fielding University, where she served since 1991, and today successfully leads the Somatics, Phenomenology, and Communicative Leadership concentration at Fielding. In addition to her numerous service and administrative roles, as a gifted educator, she has overseen multiple phenomenology research studies and dissertations, mentored and shared scores of students, scholar practitioners. In her private life, Valerie is a committed practitioner, citizen, and humanist. She's a massage therapist, a psychotherapist, and a yoga instructor, and a Dada Society member. Her sensibilities as an artist and musician are reflected in her multiple works on music expression, appreciation, and performance. She herself is a talented musician and music scholar, having studied at Valparaiso University. She is a humanistic global citizen and a peace activist in 1968 when she first marched for open housing with Father James Grappi in Milwaukee. She's an environmental activist, a former board member of Green Space Land Trust in Cambria, California, board member of Carpinteria Valley Association. In all of her contributions, accomplishments, and engagements, Valerie is completely present. In a recent review of her edited book, Contemplative Social Research, Jose Pascal de Roca of Columbia University commented that Valerie's work, quote, invites the reader to reflect on cultivating a mechanism of knowing and being, unquote. He goes on to write that Valerie's work deeply affects the pedagogy involved in bringing about social transformation, as it involves teaching that includes methods designed to quiet and shift the habitual chatter of the mind, to cultivate a capacity for deepened awareness, concentration, and insight. Such methods include journals, music, poetry, dialogue, questions, and guided meditation, and allow for an open, more fluid discourse among the disciplines, enriching one another's vantage point, allowing for new dialogic space to be created, and fostering new key learning points and insights. I'm certain that he anticipated moments just like tonight. With that, please welcome Dr. Valerie Betts.
Thank you, Luann. I so much appreciate being invited to give this talk. I feel honored that SPHS invited me, and especially because it's the George Sassis Memorial, not memorial, but in his honor. I understand that he's in the hospital, and I had sent a copy of this with Nasu, who's visiting him, so that he'd know that we're honoring him today. In 2003, Paul Richter invited me to be on a panel at SPHS about the concept of growth in psychology and a critique of the concept of growth from a phenomenological perspective. And I'm reflecting back on that paper today because my paper was called Archie Bunker Becomes a Phenomenologist and what would happen. And today I'm sort of reminded of Donald Trump, who kind of reminds me of Archie Bunker becoming the president. And the paper was called Archie Bunker Became a Phenomenologist, Got Wisdom, and Became a Yogi. And phenomenology has become a corner in the social sciences. But among those who study phenomenology, a few actually become phenomenologists. And if Archie Bunker was to study phenomenology, he would learn that a life world contains multiple vantage points. He would wonder about the name that he gave his son-in-law, Meathead. As he continued his study, he would learn that the objects of his consciousness indeed can affect the world through his own perception. And as he went on to practice bracketing, he would be asked to become aware of his assumptions and the qualities he attributes to meatheadedness, and then to set them aside. He would come to see that the word communist that he attributed to his son-in-law is a typification with many meanings. In his next lesson, Archie would be asked to set aside all distractions and free himself from media images that affect his impression of Meathead, such as a 1950s popular show, I Was a Communist for the FBI, where communists were seen as dark, running around in dark alleys. You're probably mostly too young to have seen that show, but I remember being deeply affected by it. As Archie would eventually have to go even deeper, performing the transcendental reduction. With the distractions off, Archie may begin to hear what Meathead actually said to him. He may begin asking about his experiences at school or his reasons for being anti-war. He would learn to apply imaginative variations to see what Meathead would be like if he treated him differently. And finally, he'd realize that he was actually reliable, an excellent husband for his son. And Archie would go with Meathead and come to one of our workshops in somatics in Santa Barbara and be totally transformed. In 2008, we're not quite ready for Suso. David Rahorick and I co-edited a book called Transformative Phenomenology. This was based on 10 years of our working together with our fielding doctoral students and their work, and finding out that actually the process was indeed transformative, not only for these students, but also for the participants in their research. So that's discussed in our book, from Lexington in 2008 called Transformative Phenomenology, Changing Ourselves, Life Worlds, and Professional Practice. And this reflects back to Husserl's vision. Unlike traditional approaches to research, phenomenology refuses to leave the consciousness of the scholar or practitioner out of the picture. Training programs for experts are usually done from an objectivist and positivist or scientific perspective. To move beyond this perspective requires a new way of being. Husserl conceptualized an ideal type, philosophic man, to connote this way of being. I substitute here the term phenomenologist for Husserl's philosophic man, so as not only to move beyond the gender bias of the word man, but also the negative images of philosophers as thinkers who have no practical effect. This was not Husserl's image of the philosopher. The phenomenologists work collaboratively with each other to build a new community through mutual critique. They become part of a movement, said Husserl, towards a new humanity through sympathetic understanding, so others can partake in the sensibilities of the phenomenologists. As Husserl said, I think I have a different quote there than I have in my paper. There arises then a particular humanity and a particular life vocation correlative to the accomplishments of a new culture, philosophical, and I read phenomenological, knowledge of the world creates not only those particular sorts of results, but also a human posture which immediately intervenes in the whole remainder of practical life with all its demands and ends, the ends of the historical tradition in which one is brought up and which receive their validity from this source. A new and intimate community, we would call it a community, I'm still quoting Husserl, of purely ideal interests develops among those who live for phenomenology, bound together in their devotion to ideas which not only are useful to all, but belong to all identically, unquote. And then he went on to say, phenomenology goes beyond truth-seeking to, quote, a new form of praxis whose aim is to elevate mankind through universal scientific reason according to norms of truth of all forms, to transform it from the bottom up into a new humanity made capable of an absolute self-responsibility on the basis of absolute theoretical interests. He predicted that this fusion would occur in all areas of knowledge, and it would be formulated through new educational processes. And that it would come from various forms of researchers going deeper and deeper using phenomenological method. And one example of this is the contemplative movement. I have a flyer here about here it is. There is a contemplative scholarship movement, more prominent in Europe, but we put together this book. Vincenzo Giordino and I edited this, and it's scholars from all over Europe and North America, all of whom from various disciplines, including economics, political science, psychology, sociology, who believe that contemplation is the basis for understanding, and they're anchoring their disciplines around it, so they're bringing together the human sciences. And this is what I think Husserl predicted would happen, and it is happening. And a chapter that I wrote in this book that Luann referred to contends that phenomenology is inherently a contemplative practice. It can't be anything else. So we were already there before the contemplative movement. Okay, so phenomenology involves, and I just read this quote to you from Husserl. So this ends up being what I call Husserl's phenomenologist ideal type model. And I read to you some of the qualities of this that Husserl outlines. And this means that if we are really phenomenologists, we are really up there with the angels because this is who we are. Okay, I read this quote already, I think. So then we come to Alfred Schutz from Husserl, to the Schutzian side of phenomenology. And this has been quite important in my own development because of Helmut Wagner mainly. I met him at SPHS, and it turned out that he accepted an invitation to come to Texas Women's University, where I taught at the time, for a summer. And he actually read from his manuscript that later became his wonderful text, Phenomenology of Consciousness and Sociology of the Life World. And we still use that at Fielding as one of the required texts that our students read, because it just is unsurpassed. And we have, because of Schutz, what our colleagues, Michael Barber and Lester Embry, put together a book about what they call the golden age of phenomenology at the New School for Social Research. From 1954 to 1973, many of them studied with Schutz, or as Lester Embry said, he studied in Schutz's shadow or his echo. And they produced the generation that I think Barber and Embry rightly call the golden age, because they took phenomenology based on Schutz's ideas and Karen's and others into many areas, trying to bring it to the next step, and they succeeded in that in many ways. So Schutz, with his life world approach, he opens the door for looking at the life world and its structures through his concepts that give us insight, not in an objectivist way. I'm trained as a sociologist, and society is this thing out there that has all these structures, but from within. What is the life world like to experience it from within? And these are some of the aspects of the life world that Schutz wrote about. And he also was connected in some ways to George Herbert Mead and some of the pragmatic philosophers in bringing this together. However, as Habermas warns, we are, because of our ethos of our times, most even social and human scientists are not educated about life worlds. So they go on, thinking of a social system as an organization with these structures, and we can move these structures around like they're a machine. And it ends up, as Habermas warned us, we destroy life worlds all over the place without even knowing what we're doing, because of the preponderance of rational legal thinking. This is actually a Hollywood set, so, but it shows the idea of destruction of life. Okay, so, but we have many effects from the golden age of phenomenology that we benefit from here. We heard something earlier today with Ken's work and Garfinkel's work, and many others. My paper and my slides don't quite gel together, but Helmut Wagner, not only did he spend a summer in Texas with me, and we got to be good friends. And later I was invited to visit him in Cape Cod, and he was working, he had his whole basement filled with papers and all kinds of things. And but he also taught a course, my theory courses at Texas Women's at University of North Texas for a whole year when I was on sabbatical and starting to move toward fielding in California. I didn't want to yet give up tenure, so he taught my courses for me for a year. The students were so lucky to get him. And at that time, I think he was 70-something, his early 70s. He had already had a heart attack. And I love this picture because his daughter sent me this framed picture of him after he died, his daughter Claire, and because of the what you can do with one of those iPhone cameras, you can do a selfie. So I held up his picture next to me, and now we're about the same age. So, but, well, that's pretty neat. And, okay, so Schutz and Wagner became really, really important to me. They became heroes, and the only way I could express it was in a novel, Flesh and Mind, where the protagonist, Victoria, is involved deeply with George Herbert Mead, who was kind of like her ex, really close guy. And she was married to Mead, and then she fell in love with Martin Heidegger, went to Nazi Germany. All kinds of things happened, but in this novel, Wagner and Schutz are heroes, and they help rescue people in Nazi Germany. And actually, Wagner was in the anti-Nazi underground in Germany. And then he came to New School and studied with Schutz. So, anyway, what I contend is what we have at Fielding, I kind of only discovered that in writing, I forgot to bring the book. Last year, David Rehoric and I wrote a book together, and it's called Expressions of Phenomenological Research, Consciousness and Life World Studies, and Michael was kind enough to write the preface. In writing this book, it's based on 76 dissertations that David Rehoric and I were either on the committee or chaired the committees over the past 2.5 decades. And we looked at them all, and we invited a number of the alums to write about not just their dissertation, but what is their work like now as phenomenologists? How does phenomenology or being a phenomenologist influence their continued work? But it kind of started because already at Fielding, which was founded in 1970, I think, 74, there was already a phenomenologist there. One of the 3 founders, Renata Tesch from Germany, wrote a book on qualitative research, another small one on phenomenology as a transformative process. So it's a history of Fielding. Polkinghorne was on the faculty. And when I first came, Jeremy Shapiro, you may have heard of him because he translated Habermas into English way back, and he studied with Adorno. He was on the program director, and one of the reasons I decided to leave Texas and go to Fielding was Jeremy was there. And another reason was because Fielding, unlike where I was teaching, where phenomenology and hermeneutics were seen as outside the realm, but I was allowed to teach it because the nursing students especially, and the others, occupational students who were doing practice loved it because they could relate it right to their practice. But at Fielding, they already had a study guide that Jeremy had a lot to do with, which opened up epistemologies, and phenomenology and hermeneutics were central to the study guide. So the stage came to us and said, we'd like you to write a book about your study guide. There isn't anything like that out there. And that ended up being our book, Mindful Inquiry and Social Research. And over time, and I think SPHS has been very important through these decades, not only because of Helmut Wagner, but also all of you. This is just one picture of many I have, but in '96, David, who I met at SPHS, David Rahoric, who many of you know, was a phenomenologist already, came, and we had the privilege of working together for 20-some years. So over those years, we worked together on over 76 doctoral dissertations. And we developed some research courses about a phenomenological sequence. But all along with that, we had the opportunity of inviting our students to come here to SPHS and interact with you. And many of you, some of you were on committees. That's one of our students, Lori Schneider, and of course George, and working with them. And another thing about it is we were really lucky at Fielding because we already were a transdisciplinary program. I don't say interdisciplinary, we were intradisciplinary because we had people from our faculty from different disciplines had to work together, and our students coming in were folks like Dr. Fortune, who already were skilled practitioners, and they came in with an idea. They wanted to bring more intense scholarship into their practice, not to leave it behind, not necessarily, some of them became academics, such as Luann is now a professor and a leader at Saybrook, but also to change their practice, to infuse it with new energy and new life. And so the interaction of them here made a big difference to them. It was Kurt Wolf. Anyway, I'm going off because I'm remembering more instances of interaction of SPHS scholars with our students. So I'm calling this, but here's more examples of it. Phil Lewin was on a couple of committees as external, and George. Now we're fortunate that Carlos and Michael are on some committees. And just a few of the many pictures I have of SPHS scholars interacting with our students at Fielding. So that resulted in this book as a way of crystallizing. This book came out 10 years ago in 2008. But the chapters were all written by our then alumni based on phenomenology. And the first chapter, David and I were able to give a very brief introduction what we call transformative phenomenology is, and also the importance of integrating Gadamersian hermeneutics into the process, because we found that once the students had the text, either that they wrote of their own experience or interviewed or discovered, they needed some kind of a handle for interpretation. And we discovered in Gadamer's Truth and Method 3 kinds of hermeneutics, 3 levels that we symbolized by the wild horse running through the woods. Level 1, you see the wild horse and you describe the wild horse from a distance. This is on around page 187 of the English translation of Truth and Method. That's level 1. Level 2, you come up to the horse and you do kind of a biography of the horse in more detail. Level 3, you get on the horse and you ride and you are changed and you don't know where the horse is going to take you. And all 3 are valid forms of hermeneutics inspired by Gadamer that students have worked with. So, and one of our colleagues, Mark LaFountain, wrote a chapter also on how he was changed by bringing, in teaching phenomenology, but that got cut off in the slide. Okay, so in the process of this, questions arose. And a lot of the questions came from you, from the philosophers and scholars at SPHS, saying to some of our students, well, what you're doing is really good, but it isn't phenomenology. You're not working from the epoch. Hey, what happened to your reduction? And they didn't know what they were hearing. So we had to figure this out. What does it mean? And I think phenomenology still has this problem. It's a big problem out there. What is it? And many people don't know this, even astute academics. And we have all kinds of dilutions of it out there. One of them is Smith and al. Interpretive phenomenological analysis, which is not really phenomenological analysis at all, and even Smith admits that, but it's caught on. And students will see it and, oh, this is easy, I can follow this recipe and I'll be doing phenomenology. And recently we have a critique from Van Manen about this, as well as Georgie, trying to show, no, that's good qualitative research, but it's not phenomenology. So this is kind of a constant problem for us. How do we make it clear what we are and how unique the process is of phenomenology? So in working through this, David and I came up with 3 levels of encounter with phenomenology, and our dissertations could be categorized in one of these 3 ways: phenomenologically inspired, phenomenologically oriented, and phenomenologically based. So as a phenomenologist, I would give this one the gold star, this one the silver star, and that one the red or blue star. Not that these aren't just wonderful research, but they're not, in terms of being phenomenology, they're not as grounded as the based ones are. So an example of the phenomenologically inspired is one of our alumni, Valerie Grossman. We had a group of students who went to Mizoram, India, and we had an action research project there. And she studied phenomenology. Her dissertation was, she went back to Mizoram, India. That's a tribal country between Myanmar and Bangladesh, poorest state in India. And they were troubled because every 25 years the bamboo trees would flower, rats would multiply because they live off the blossoms, and they called it Mautan, and there would be a famine, and the people died at a young age, so there weren't many people who remembered the previous Mautan. So she went and worked on that issue with them. But why it was phenomenologically inspired is that she said she could not have worked with the Mizo people, and it would not have been successful in developing the program with them that did not prevent but greatly decrease the Mautan, was because of phenomenology, because that helped her to realize her own, where she was coming from, her own assumptions, her sedimentations, and how different they were from the Mizos. So she couldn't expect them to come to a meeting at a scheduled time if something more important intervened. All kinds of things that she spelled out, that if she were not if she didn't study phenomenology, she would have gone there and just not been able to be effective. So she was phenomenologically inspired. Her methodology and nothing else really to do with it, but it had a big impact on her research. But phenomenologically oriented, Phil Lewin was the external for the student Christina Kalos. She came to 1 or 2 SPHS and met with Phil, and she did a study of teenagers learning to become Greek dancers, because she worked with them. And in a Greek Orthodox church. And she studied over time and saw that that was very important for their development and their self-image and their pride and their confidence. And that was her study, and she thought it was phenomenology because she was interviewing them. And Phil Lewin kept saying, well, yeah, but you're not bracketing enough, and you're not this, and you're not that. And she was, some of this back and forth between our students and SPHS scholars has been a little sandpapery, but it's been all to the good, because then she could say, okay, this has helped me clarify my topic, it's helped me clarify my method. It's not pure phenomenology, but it's oriented in that direction. And then we have those who we call phenomenologically based. And they're both the method and the theory behind it and the techniques are all grounded in phenomenology. They show that they have actually read and studied some of our most important thinkers, like Schutz, like Husserl, and like some of you. And they show this in connection to their work. And so we call those the phenomenologically based. One example of a phenomenologically based work is by Ayumi Nishi, who studied what it is to be a servant leader. She herself has a background in working in corporations, developing leadership globally. And she became involved with this movement called the servant leadership movement. They have meetings and publications, really liked it. And then she also, by coming to some of our classes at Fielding, fell in love with Martin Heidegger. I may have had some influence on her because I fell in love with him myself pretty badly some years